what kind of subsidence effects will anybody notice all the way from well south of Fanny Bay to the northernmost extent of their mining project? We don't know that, and at this point they haven't answered those kinds of questions because they don't know either at this point. The other question is, this is a seismically active area, and what are the consequences of an earthquake should one happen when they've started to hollow out under the ground all the way from southern to the northern extent of their mine. Next slide, please. Some of those questions I'm not answering, I'm just going to throw them out, and I'm sure more will come up in our discussion later. There's a lot of things we don't have the answers to at this point, but many of these kinds of concerns they will have to address at some point, but they're not too keen on addressing them right now, part because they don't know the answers, and part because they really want to talk about the good aspects of their project, which when we scratch our heads, we can't come up with too many. But one good aspect would be jobs, and Campbell spoke to that briefly. One nominally good aspect. Local taxes, we have no idea what those will be at this point, but there won't be a lot. There won't be royalties to government because this is privately owned coal, so they don't pay a royalty or a mining tax on it. And profits, should they accrue out of this project, won't come to you. They will go to the shareholders of the company. So those are some considerations. There aren't a heck of a lot of benefits to this for the local communities. You probably all read this while I was talking, so that's good. They propose mining 2.2 million tons a year, and depending on what kind of coal, they grind the coal up to certain sizes and put it through a washing process. The magnetite makes the liquid that they're washing this stuff in, water, much denser. So when this ground up ore or run-of-mine coal goes into the wash process, the coal floats and the heavier rock settles out. So it's actually a fairly simple and straightforward way, and in and of itself, it isn't terribly toxic. But we'll get to that toxic thing later on. If they're producing thermal coal, a lower grade coal where they can take a lot more stuff to market than they could if they're producing metallurgical coal, their proposal, their evidence so far indicates that they'll have 1.5 million tons left over. So a third of what they're taking out of the ground stays behind on the ground as waste. If they're going for metallurgical coal, the higher price stuff, then about 40% of what they've taken out of the ground will go to market as a marketable product. And a lot more of it will stay behind as waste. This waste issue is absolutely critical, not just with coal mining, but with all mining. Anybody who's been here longer than just a few years knows about the Solon River experience, and maybe sometime later tonight somebody could speak to that briefly, because I'm not too conversant with it. I'm here talking about Ray at the moment. They propose to ship the coal out of Port Alberni. That's their preferred location, although they still have Duke Point and they still have Middle Point and Campbell River kind of on their list of possible shipping locations. The preference for Port Alberni is it's at least as short a drive as the other two locations, and they need to keep the boat under contract for at least a day or possibly a couple of days less than if they're bringing the boat around up the Strait of Georgia to either of these two inland ports. So that's why Port Alberni is preferred. And their preference, once again, is cost saving. They're looking at the bottom line always, because this is not going to be a high-end operation. This will be as cheap a mine as they can build. They're looking at trucking the stuff to Port Alberni. They're not looking at using the rail. I think, if it's a point of clarification, sure, I can do it right now.
I was just wondering if they'd ever seen the coal pile into Austin.
Oh, can we get to that later? It's a good question, but let's get to that later. Rail is unlikely because of the cost, and I've heard a figure of $17 million. I don't even recall where that came from. It may have come from the company itself, but that's money that they don't want to pony up right now.